Now let's focus our attention just for a few minutes on this where clause. And I really want to point out the where clause because a where clause really should always be included on any of your queries. Now notice the fine print at the bottom here, except in class. I don't put a where clause because it just takes up more time typing. It adds a lot of time to each example and it just kind of distracts. But the where clause defines the condition to be met for the rows to be returned in a query. Now this also includes when you're executing updated or deleted queries or update or delete queries, and it just basically limits the number of rows returned. Now there are instances when we get into indexing where using that where clause can drastically lower the workload on your SQL Server. And trust me, if you get out there in a production environment and start issuing a bunch of queries without where clauses, just like you see when we do a query from the person.person table, without a where clause, it returns 19,000 rows. And that can get pretty expensive. Executing that query in a production environment without a where clause will place an unnecessary load on the database server. And if you get in the habit of not using a where clause and you execute an update or delete query without it, it can be disastrous. And I will demonstrate a disaster to you when we get to update and delete a little bit later on in the course. Now, when we're using where, we're looking for some condition. And the following operators can be used. We can use equal sign, not equal, greater than, less than, greater than or equal, less than or equal, between, which is an inclusive range, and we'll talk more about it a little bit later on, and like, and we will definitely talk about like later on. There's a lot of power there. But for now, let's jump out into the SQL Server Management Studio, and let's talk about this where clause. I'm just going to do a select asterisk from person.person. And so we'll execute that query, and we already know what's going to happen, right? It's going to take it 4 or 5 seconds to run here because it's going to return 19,972 rows. But notice we have email promotions here, 0, 1, and 2. Well, what if we go back up here and add a where clause and we say where email promotion, and notice T-SQL is not case sensitive. If we say it equals 2, all right, and we execute this again, notice, let's see how long it's going to take. Notice it only returned 3,770 rows, and everybody has an email promotion. Now notice I didn't say anything about an order by here. I didn't mention order by, and so it's in, it looks like business entity ID order. I don't know if that helps me. So really, I should come right here and do an order by last name. Now when I execute this query, you're going to notice they come back, and here we are. They're in ascending order, automatically ascending, based on the last name. Now, let's go back up here to our query. I got emails where the email promotion equals 2. Notice it's 3,770 rows. But what if I just say greater than 2? You know what's going to happen. It's going to pull everybody greater than 2. That's going to be 0s, 1s, and 2s. Actually, there are none greater than 2. Let's do it the other way. And you'll always have to watch your logic like I just did. Make sure you're thinking the same way it is. And so anything less than 2, it could be 3,000 people, see here, that are 2s, right? Because less than 2 means 2. If I do less than or equal to, then that's like it's going to get everybody in the table. So using that where clause is going to limit exactly what we get back. And there is our result, 19,972. So grab some data that you know, play with an email statement, okay? And we can combine these, and we'll talk about those a little bit later on as well. But for now, make sure that you always include a where statement, especially when you're working on a production environment, because that is going to limit the number of rows that come back. And we're going to use the column list right here to limit the number of columns we get. And of course, this asterisk is giving us every column in the table. Okay, so that's some basics on the where clause.